Welcome to the Gardens and Graveyards channel. My name is Charisma, and today we're meeting in the studio and we're going to do what is called a living arrangement. So basically it's like a flower arrangement using potted plants. And this is a really fun way to do a collection of plants in one space and make it really beautiful. And the way that we do it, instead of creating a container that's like multiple plants that need multiple different needs, or having to create it, let's see. I've made containers where we put multiple plants that need similar needs and they all go in the same pot and the same soil. This arrangement, everybody will have their own pot and their own particular soil, but it will be in a container to make it look cohesive. So let's get started. We're going to use some baby spider plants, which this container is just full of rooted baby spiders. This one has some soil, so we're going to put these in a pot. Just trying to make some room here. And then we're going to use these orchids that I used for a different project recently when the Tibetan nuns were in town. I had brought these as an offering to their altar, but when they left town, I brought home all the arrangements. Most of them, have been discarded into the compost, but of course these are alive. So we'll continue to use them. They are not at their prime, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, what you're gonna look for when you buy an orchid. But we have a couple of those, and then I also have this little Hoya that's rooted in. That's been also sitting in some water and has some roots on it. So we want to put that in some soil as well, which means I need another container. Okay, and then I have some decorative rock and I've got some decorative moss. And what we're going to do is I have this big round container. There is a plug in it. If I wanted to pot it up and use it for a plant, I could unplug it. But I'm going to leave the plug in because in the future I kind of want to see if I can create a table fountain out of this. But right now I need to do something with this collection of plants, and I thought it would be really pretty to bring me through January, when we really start doing a lot more houseplant revamping and replanting and all that stuff. So for right now I'm just going to use it as a container to hold the collection. So I'm going to clear this off, and then we'll stage this, and then we'll start putting the plants in and the moss. Just need to make some room. You know what, I'm going to go ahead and pot these guys up first so that we could just get that done. I'm just using all-purpose potting soil. And grab another container. Great. Okay. So first I'm going to do these little Hoyas. See, they've got nice, good, healthy roots. I'm just going to pop them down into the soil here. Put them together. I'm going to put a little bit more soil around it. Okay. All right. And we'll get these all watered in at the very end. We couple of babies in here, which is super fun. Make sure that we just plant the roots and not the leaves. You can see that the roots are turned this way because the bowl is shallow. So I'm sure they'll be happy to stretch out a little bit. Okay, beautiful. And let's clear this off a little. Okay, now I want to stage this guy. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get some packing material like this and just sort of wrap it around the outer rim to just begin staging. This is just like packing material that I get from Amazon. I just save it so that I could do stuff like this. Alright, so now I've got a little bit of that in there. I'm not going to keep this old moss around this container. So let me just get rid of that. And I do want this to be just below the level of the rim. Or I want the container, this container, to be just below this container. So you don't see it, but it's easy to access. So I need to put some packing material down on the bottom to lift this guy up because you can see it's quite a bit shorter than this container. So that is pretty good. And then I do want a drip tray because I don't want all this packing material to get all yucky. So we're just gonna stick that drip tray right there. And I'm gonna grab a couple more drip trays. Another option too is instead of having a bunch of small ones, we could put a big one in there and have several containers just all in one tray, which is helpful. Right. So I'm just going to set these next to each other here. It needs to be it's pretty close. All right, and then I want to add my orchids. So I'm going to take them out of their decorative containers. And remove the moss. just gonna leave it in this orchid container. And I think I'm gonna separate this out a little bit. So we're gonna put her in her own drip tray over here. It's okay if the containers get a little squished. I need a little bit more packing material. Just put some more down on the bottom for the back side. This is getting a little bit squished, but that's okay. So long as she fits in here. And she's also at the level of container that I want it to be. Things feel a little bit wonky for a minute until all the material is in there. And do the same thing with this one. Remove the decorative container, remove the moss. And then add this in. This might actually also go into her own container here. So before I add this one in, which might end up kind of off to the side here, which I'll need another level of packing material, I want to get all of these nice and secure so they're not falling over. So we're going to continue on with some packing material. I also like to save little pieces of styrofoam for this kind of purpose, that I can put right, actually putting it right into the container like this with the orchid. So this isn't going to get yucky like paper would. Same with this one. The key is that you just don't see it once the moss has been added. And she's kind of falling over. Let's get some paper. Make sure she's good and stable in there. I'm going to this back here so those don't really adjust. And then I can put this down on the bottom to place this plant on top of, so it is also at the level that we want it to be at. Let me spin this around and see what it's looking like. Okay. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with how this arrangement looks. Now we're gonna grab our moss and fill in all the empty gaps, and it will all pull together that way. All right, so we just got this new moss in. It is a preserved moss. So just kind of looks like this, and it's got a little bit of bark kind of stuck to the back of it, which is normal. It does maybe need to be a little bit more reconstituted. I could add a little spritz of water on it. That'll help brighten it up and make it more life-like, because it'll just kind of spring up. It's been kind of matted in this box, but we want to kind of roll it kind of like a little burrito, and we're just going to start covering all the empty spaces. I like to go on the outer rim first. Want to make sure that you go underneath any leaves. Some of these very big. Because they're stacked in layers, you kind of want to make sure that there's no bark and leaves on the next layer that were stuck to the bottom of the previous layer. So we're just going to come through here, lift up our leaves, get those out of the way. The leaves. Do a little bit of overlapping on the moss so that it's full coverage, like so. Like this, just tuck in around, making sure that you can't see any of the packing material. You can see it's starting to fill in here. It's up to you if you want to cover the soil, it's perfectly fine, but when you do that, wherever the moss is touching the soil, it will start to turn black and yucky sooner than the rest of the moss will. But sometimes that's the look you want, because you want to have full coverage, and that's totally fine. It can be replaced. All right, so the idea of this is that the spider plants are kind of acting as a ground cover for this arrangement. And we've got a little bit of a spiller here. We've got the spider plants acting like a ground cover, and then we've got the feature plants. So that's really fun. So the Hoya, which is this, and the spider plants, which are these, have very similar water requirements, but they're all in their own little pots. So I can just feel in there and see what exactly they need. The orchids, what I've discovered is the best thing for orchids is they like to be they like to have a lot of moisture around them, but they don't necessarily love to sit in water. If you have a situation where you could have running water all the time, they would love that. Like, they want their roots washed a lot. But, you know, we really can't provide that for them in this kind of situation. So I just give them a tiny bit of water on a regular basis. And one way that I have been successful with keeping orchids is just placing, on an orchid this size, I would place 2 ice cubes maybe once a week. And on this size, I would place 1 ice cube, and that gives it a slow, soft trickle that just sort of like gently moistens their roots, which is what they really love. The other thing that I wanted to point out when you are buying orchids, this one actually has a good example. It's been trained into this very rigid structure here, but gently remove it from the structure so I could show you. This is the end of her blooms, and when you buy an orchid that has a closed bud, the more closed buds at the top of the stem, the better. So like maybe you find one that just has like 1 or 2 blooms open up here and then a bunch of buds. Well, you're gonna have the lifespan of the bloom cycle is so much longer, and you'll get to enjoy your orchid for so much longer if you allow, if you buy it in that way, opposed to buying it all completely open. Just remove this stake. Just make it not quite as, make it a little bit higher, and just give it a little bit of structure. Okay. And yeah, that's lovely. That gives it a little bit more open flowiness to it, to me, I think. No. And then, I mean, I could bring it back if I wanted to, but let's just leave it like that for now. The last thing I'd like to do is add a few of these decorative rocks, just to give it another earth element. So I've got kind of an open space all throughout right here. So I think I'm just gonna get a handful of them and just sort of place them around. Or toss them everywhere. This one is kind of puffy. Get it. All right. Awesome. So the last thing I want to do to just kind of help this moss kind of stay in place is put a little water. Just steal some water out of there. Oops. I'm just spritzing it with a little bit of water. It'll kind of help it rejuvenate, reconstitute, and a little bit of moisture will make all these plants that are in this arrangement love to have a little bit of extra humidity. I'm usually pretty careful about adding humidity because I have so much humidity in my home. But in this case, I just really want to help the moss kind of come back alive. So that's it. That is our arrangement for the day. I hope that this inspired you to do something fun and different with your houseplants. Oh, look at this. It still looks really empty to me. I think I want to add a rock. Let's just add a big rock right here. I think that's gonna really help elevate it. Give it something more to look at. All right, I'm gonna stop messing with it and be happy, and we're just gonna place it somewhere on a table that can accommodate this big arrangement. But it was really fun to do this with you all. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're celebrating your life, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.